for the first time in history, less than a decade ago, chronic diseases started killing us more than famine, pestilence, bacteria, viruses, all those things combined.
Yet despite the suffering of millions, innovation is being strangled by a broken pharmaceutical system where red tape, corporate greed, and bureaucratic middlemen leave patients behind. But what if there's another way? My guest, biotech entrepreneur and humanitarian Lou Reese, believes there is, and he's not just dreaming, Lou is building it. In this conversation, Lou reveals a radical new model for drug development and delivery, one that bypasses Big Pharma, puts patients first, and could bring breakthrough Parkinson's treatments to market faster and at a fraction of the cost. Together, we unpack how Parkinson's patients, just like those with Alzheimer's, are being failed by a system that prioritizes profit over access, and we explore how a bold, America First Pharma plan might change that forever.
Allow like an America First Pharma plan where you literally get to go and do a direct negotiation with these biotechs for disruptively low prices. We're talking less than 1% of the existing price structure.
This is a call to action, because if we don't fight for innovation now, we'll be trapped in the same failing system tomorrow. This is some future day, and that future starts now. This is a real treat to have Mr. Lou Reese on Some Future Day. Lou is a new friend, but he's definitely philosophically aligned with me, and I think we are from the same spirit as well. But Lou mostly does some incredible work. People aren't familiar with his work, and that's why it's really an honor to have you join me today, Lou, on Some Future Day.
Mark, thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Lou, you're very intellectual. You cross different business sectors from finance into pharmaceuticals, but at the core, you're a caring human being. And what really caught my attention in getting to know you as of late is that your passion for humanity might outweigh everybody else's passion, and in some cases combined. It's really the most legitimate passion that I've ever seen for humankind. I'm curious, in your opinion, why are we not doing well enough for humanity as it relates to health in general?
I mean, I think about this all the time, right? And I have kids, and I think that when I look at the kids and I look at the way that they work, you get to see it through really kind of unbiased and unadulterated eyes, right? And if a kid sees another kid fall down, they help that other kid up. They don't ask what team they're on, and they don't get into all of the, like what country they're from and all this other stuff. It like kindness actually permeates much broader than we realize, right? And so that's like a big motivating factor. And what I saw, and I'll tell you what my son Bear, he's my oldest son, he's 14. What he taught me about 10 years ago, we had gone from Hawaii to this other place, and the average income was about $1.50 a day. And our guide, Christian, we were in a dugout canoe, single piece of wood, and using like a piece of that as an oar. And Christian was making 3 times that, right? So he was making $2,000 or $3,000 a year. And so he was doing well in this area. And my son looked at me and he said, "Dad, I have a question." And he was very perturbed, And I said, "Okay, what's up, Bear?" And he said, "When we were in Hawaii, you bought a $3,000 ukulele from your friend, and Christian makes less than that a year. What's up with that?" And without even really thinking about it, my reflex was to say that we're liars and hypocrites, and it applies to every one of us to some degree, right? And the reason is that we say every life is worth the same, and we say that all of these things are the way that we communicate with our kids. But then when they show it to you, it was so interesting to me. And so I've taken that lesson and looked at our existing medical system, and if you look at it, I mean, it's broken, and it's not broken a little bit. It's not like got a flat tire and we have to pump it up. This is like wholesale broken. And the way that you see that, the absolute brokenness, is in the fact that in the US, we spend over 2 times what any other country in the world spends per person for health. And in those same countries, they live 7 or 8 years longer, right? The level of chronic disease in this country is higher than in any of those other countries in the OECD, right? Any other developed country. And yet we're spending on average 4 times more than those countries are on per person per year on health. So if you said, what does that look like? That looks like a broken system, right? It looks absolutely broken. And so the stats there are overwhelming, and we see it now not only in increasing rates in chronic diseases with kids, but for the first time in history, less than a decade ago, chronic diseases started killing us more than famine, pestilence, bacteria, viruses, all those things combined. So we actually are dying from chronic diseases that are right now not being managed, and that's the reason why we're seeing this broken system. So what's happening? There's not, and so I think that there's this solution there, and that's kind of the way that I've worked my whole career, is looking at, whether it was lowering the price of alternative energy with one of the world's first solar funds, or creating the first LEED multifamily project to lower, energy usage, and to streamline construction in a way that was built for the future. If you could do that in this system, in the healthcare system, then it's a really massive opportunity. And today, the way that it works is that Big Pharma strangles innovation and slows it down. And they do that because the costs of the late stage trials and the redundancy and all of these different systems that they've built in through decades of setting up this system. And the outcome is that over 90% of the drugs are created by small biotechs, but they then have to sell to big pharma at some stage. And when it gets put into that big pharma system, then you end up with higher prices, less access, and the system it's an unbelievably opaque system. There's no transparency whatsoever. There are reimbursements, there are disclosed reimbursements, there are insurance companies, there's all these things. So it's not like when you go to the grocery store and you buy a lemon and it's a dollar. It's not like it's like you go to the grocery store, the lemon's $5 and $3 go to some guy that you've never met that never saw the lemon, and then a dollar goes to, this other thing, and like it's that opaque. And so the problem is when you explain it, and you've seen this and heard it, it turns into like it looks like alphabet soup, right? It's just a bunch of acronyms and letters and things and tiers and all this stuff, and that's not necessary. It's just not. It's built to obfuscate the truth, right? It's built as a smokescreen to be so complicated and it basically covers up the fact that it's broken, right? Why would a cream that's a prescription drug that we make in the United States cost 10 times more in the same bottle and the same cardboard packaging with the same label as it does in Canada, right across the border? Why would that be? Right? And the answer is three letter acronyms and all these different things and all this stuff. But but the truth is, like, how do you solve that? You solve that, and this is the big hairy thing that I'm doing and thinking about now as my like my purpose here for fixing the system is actually really elegant, right? Instead of all of that, allow like an America First Pharma plan where you literally get to go and do a direct negotiation with these biotechs for disruptively low prices, right? We're talking less than 1% of the existing price structure. And in so doing, you actually create a path where the natural flow of innovation is opened up through another channel. So instead of the only path going through Big Pharma and into that system and into the next system and into the next system, you actually get to create another waterway, right? Another stream of innovation. Um, and honestly, for me, the reason I like it is the ability to force real innovation in the biggest areas of need. And in so doing, Big Pharma will do that once they see that they can potentially participate in it. Maybe they'll do that in the future. But at the moment, they're not gonna do things like that because it affects their profit and it affects the system that they've built. Um, so that's that's what I'm thinking about.
That's a lot, right? There's a ton to unpack there, but just to for exemplary purposes, to become a little bit more simplistic for the audience and those who might not be familiar with what you're talking about, can you give us a concrete example of a chronic illness that is being that treatment or a drug for a chronic illness is being hindered as it relates to development because of what I understand when you talk about the system? It looks like the three-letter word and acronyms are the government. You have big pharma, you have these patients and doctors, and then the scientists who are creating drugs. So, like, what's in the pipeline right now, or what could be in the pipeline in the future to help solve this issue of like this murky system that you're describing?
Well, so right now we have the world's only privately controlled phase 3 Alzheimer's prevention asset. Alzheimer's in the US costs over half a trillion dollars a year. And I believe that we can prevent the majority of that expenditure, like the vast majority of it. Now, the money is one thing, but the suffering is actually really like the key here. The patient suffering and the family suffering. The one of the leading causes of bankruptcy is actually this long-term patient care and medical bankruptcy, right? So it's destroying families, it's destroying people's lives. It's a horrible disease. 7 million people in the US currently have Alzheimer's, and it's the sixth leading cause of death in the country and the only one in the top 10 that's growing. Right. So there's a really unique opportunity there to create a pilot project for this America First Pharma idea, and we at Axiom would love to forego the traditional system and actually do something really disruptive here. And I can't imagine a better first step because you're going after the most feared disease in the country. So it's past cancer, it's past all these things. It's the most feared disease in the country, and it's the most expensive single chronic disease in the country, right? So, and the current treatments, not prevention, but the current treatments are, on average over $100,000 a year cumulatively for the administration and for the drugs. And they come with a hefty side effect profile, right? And this goes back to the acronyms where it's not just government, it's also scientists do this too, to some degree. But there's something called ARIA-E, which if you look it up, it's drug-induced brain swelling, right? But if you write drug-induced brain swelling, it sounds much worse than ARIA-E. And so these drugs have that as a side effect. It's listed, it's known, and they're also cumbersome on the patients because you have to get IV infusions on a regular basis, and these are only approved for treatment because of those limitations, because of the you can't go into prevention with something that costs, a fortune every year and is extremely cumbersome. You gotta get IV infusions and it causes these side effect profiles. So you're not gonna do that. But in our case, it's we're ideally situated to be able to prevent, right? And that's really the solution here is let's prevent this from happening in the first place. Let's prevent, you don't wanna wait until your brain has problems to solve it. You wanna make it so your brain doesn't have problems. And so on a very, like, simple basis, that's what we're trying to do, and what's disruptive is, what should Lou do right now? If I were doing it like everybody else in the existing system, let me show you how broken it is. Big Pharma has come to us and they've tried to buy the drug, they've tried to shelve the drug, and wait so that they could keep making profits from their existing approved treatments, even knowing that this
Wow.
would be safer or better. They've tried to buy it again. So there's been multiple approaches now from this angle. And then what would happen? I would lose control of the ability to negotiate the price. So they would make the price more and they would make the access less. So, all I believe is that we should figure out a way to make the right thing easy and the wrong thing hard. And what we're doing now in the system is making the wrong thing easy and the right thing hard. Now, getting, hundreds of millions of dollars and huge amounts of money from the pharma for selling the product to them, or billions of dollars for selling the product to them, and licenses and fees and all these great things, that's why people do that. And what I'm saying is, I don't want to do that. This is a historic opportunity with historic leadership to make a really massive change, not a little change, not fixing a flat tire, like putting a motor on the bicycle. Like this is a different thing. And we're doing it in a way that is fundamentally disruptive. So without those pieces, you can't do something this big to the system. And it won't just be us after this pilot program works. Other programs for major chronic diseases could come in and be examples where you were directly challenging the existing model and actually encouraging a model that supported low-cost drugs as opposed to the most expensive drugs possible for the least amount of people. You'd go after the least, like how many people can you access that need it? And how can you make it as affordable as possible so that you're actually doing something that's right? And what blows my mind, you said this earlier, which is really, really funny, but you know, I can't think of it any other way. Like I just when people are like, wait, but what's the other thing? I'm like, if you it wouldn't why wouldn't we do this if it's gonna help all these people? Like,
Well, let me ask you. So just so the audience understands, I think what you're talking about here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the disruptive nature of what you're talking about as it relates to this new America First approach with pharmaceuticals, with treatment, with drugs, is to align with the government, essentially to create a new channel of distribution. And then in turn, what you're doing is giving more access at a better, more affordable price point to drugs that are for drugs that are going to beat major illnesses such as Alzheimer's, correct?
yeah, absolutely. And by pre-negotiating directly with the government. So right now, most people don't know this because again, it's hidden, right? It's not transparent. So every dollar we spend in the United States on drugs right now, on average, 70 cents go to the middlemen that are doing nothing. They're meant to be there to negotiate the prices and get fair prices for the American public. These are the pharmacy benefit managers, the PBMs, and the insurance companies. Okay. And that's where the money goes. So they're not, it would be the equivalent of you going to buy a car and the car costing $10,000. And then you pay the $10,000 and $7,000 of it go to the car salesman. It's an unimaginable outcome, but that's actually what's happening.
So you're saying the cost of goods with regards to a lot of these pharmaceuticals and new drugs that are coming out should be significantly less.
So the cost of the consumer should be significantly less.
How much lower?
For us, what I'm offering in the America First Pharma pilot for Axiom with Alzheimer's is less than 1% of the existing cost. So I'm offering for $1,000 per patient per year to prevent Alzheimer's. And the existing treatments are over $100,000 a year combined costs, and they have that side effect profile. So I'd like to save, 95% plus on the biologic drugs. And
That's
right
huge.
now in the country, 60%, about a little bit more, 60% of all of our drug spend is on biologic drugs, which are these more expensive drugs that are usually innovative. So they're usually not generic. And so by tackling that and lowering the cost of that by 95%, these are huge amounts of savings for the government if we unleash the innovation that's currently being strangled by Big Pharma and the existing system.
So, Lou, I got to ask you, I mean, it begs the question, what you're doing is not just disrupting the pharmaceutical ecosystem, but you're also disrupting capitalism. It becomes, to a sense, if you have this private sector, public sector partnership, and the government is helping fund these new treatments that you're developing, isn't it a form of socialism essentially? Can't it hurt innovation? Can't it hurt the concept of capitalism, not just with regards to capturing profit margin, but unlocking innovation advances, not just, by the way, with drugs and treatment medicines, but also with, I would imagine that the next thing to follow beyond drugs would be medical equipment and beyond.
The current system, because of all of these layers of complexity that have been added, is actually not allowing the natural flow of capital and entrepreneurial output from the United States, right? And the reason it's blocking it is actually that it's directly beneficial to big pharma to be necessary in that equation. I mean, it directly benefits them to control that equation.
I see it.
And so what happens now,
I agree.
and what I think we do here is instead of the government, like, they're not going to subsidize anything. They're going to pre-negotiate disruptive pricing that's very low based off of the success of the drug. So in the event that the drug does these things, the government agrees that they will buy them. The reason that matters is that it allows for the capital, the public markets and the private markets to say there's a market there when this succeeds and if this succeeds. There's not the insurance company negotiation, there's not the negotiation with the PBMs, there's not all these middlemen that are directly affected and in the pocket and in collusion in effect with big pharma, right? Because big pharma might have 50 products on that reimbursement list, right? And so they can actually exclude things from the reimbursement list at the insurance level and the PBM level, right? And so by going directly to the largest consumer, which is the government, and pre-negotiating the best deal possible, you're giving visibility, you're giving transparency to the capital flow. And so that will fund innovation. That will drive a whole new generation of people that actually would give lower prices to the government, would give more access, but are currently being strangled by the existing system. Right. And so I actually think of it as an increase in transparency and I think the natural flow of I'm a capitalist, right? Like
I know you are.
I believe that the natural flow of capital will respond to that. And what we need to do now, and it goes back to this incentivizing, making the right thing easy, right? This is so obviously the right thing. We want lower prices for the people that need it. That's it.
For humanity, it's the way we started our relationship and this conversation. For sure, it's great for humanity. Like, so let's go back to the human side because there's tremendous benefit to what you're talking about. How many, focusing on Alzheimer's right now, how many, like, what percentage of the population who suffers with Alzheimer's do you think are not getting proper medical treatment, proper medical care because of the high price?
Wow. That's a
Because that's
really,
what you're focused on. You're
yeah.
focused on the person that's suffering from the disease,
I mean,
right?
so this is gonna sound totally insane, but the answer is virtually no one is getting even those treatments that have the side effect profiles. It's the saturation in the market is extremely low. And it's growing, right? And it's growing because they're figuring out ways that it's being reimbursed and all of these other things. But it's cumbersome and it's challenging and the side effect profile is challenging. And so there's real limitations. I mean, if you and I know I told you this before, but you know, one of the things that I'm both grateful for and that causes a lot of like real pressure is when you're in a position like we are and you have, a bunch of these really unique drugs that are doing things that they just nobody else is doing yet. Um, a lot of people reach out to me and ask for help for themselves, for
Sure, of
their partners, for their parents, for their, brothers and sisters. And it's like,
course.
um, you know, it's amazing because at some point, that's all I wanted to be able to do, right? Was be able to help. So when you have these few tangible manifestations, it's amazing. When you talk to a patient that actually got better from Parkinson's, like all these things are amazing achievements that I'm super proud of and finally get to feel like the impact. But, um, when you know that those are just the people that have my phone number and that I know and that are reaching out and that they might have had to go through 3 or 4 different friends to find out how to get to me or whatever it was, and then finally they're talking to me to try to get access to a trial or to get more information or whatever it is, and then you think of the millions of people, right? 1 every 60 seconds that gets Alzheimer's in the United States alone. And it's a lot of suffering, right? It's a lot of people that are going through, the hardest disease that I can imagine. And my grandmother died of Alzheimer's, and watching it change someone from being, the person that you love, your Bama or whatever, into a person that doesn't recognize you, um, is one of in the agitation and the manifestations in between that, um, it's one of the hardest things that I've ever seen, and I believe that it robs us of what makes us human, right? Which is our ability to think and our minds and our experiences. Um, so I really do think of the most feared and the most expensive disease as also something that is is battling to devour the consciousness of humanity to some degree, right? In these individuals and in the patients. And what's a better thing to fight for than preserving their humanity, right? Like it's so it's so clear. And I think that's a big part of it, and it's funny, again, I didn't realize that this was something that everyone didn't do, but, like, you talk to our kids and you say, "What do your parents do what do they do?" And they'll say, "Oh, they work to save people." And I had some friend over and they were like, "Wait a second." When I asked my kid, he's like, "Dad goes to work so he could make money so that I could pay for school because school's really expensive and, apartments are expensive and blah, blah, blah." It was like this whole hedge fund mentality in New York on the Upper East Side. And so the kid had a good value system. He knew that he was grateful for all those things and grateful that his dad was working
Sure.
hard to do it. I mean, it was better than saying I don't know. So it's not bad, but it was interesting how he jumped on that and was, so the dad jumped on it and was like, "Wait, I want my kid to say that I'm working to save
Yeah,
people."
I mean, it's definitely, it's great. I believe you. It's noble. I mean, you and I have created a relationship. So for the audience, there's no doubt that Lou is really mission oriented to save humanity. There's no doubt about it. But Lou, going back to something you just stated, I want to make sure I understand because it's the number you just threw out as far as the amount of individuals suffering from Alzheimer's receiving the maximum optimum amount of treatment and care that they can have. It's blowing my mind. Am I correct? You said 0%?
It's I'll tell you exactly the percentage, but it's it's less than 1% are currently on
Okay.
the key treatment.
When you say key treatment, what does that consist of exactly as
So
you're looking?
so the key treatments right now are monoclonal antibodies, which are biologic drugs, and they're infused through like IV infusions on either a 2-week or monthly basis, so every 2 weeks or every month. And you don't take them until you have cognitive impairment of some kind, right? So they're only for treatment of Alzheimer's. They're not for prevention of Alzheimer's. And so there's one that's that's owned by Lilly, and then there's another one that's an Eisai Biogen product. And it's interesting also that the reason that they hey, Tony, can you check real quick and find out how many doses of monoclonal antibody for Alzheimer's were sold between Lilly and Biogen Eisai? My belief is that it's gonna be I think it's like 100,000 maybe total between all of them around the world. So it might even be less, it might be 60. Um,
And you said how many people suffer from
7,000,000 have
Alzheimer's?
Alzheimer's currently in the US and 40,000,000 are at risk.
Right. So you're saying we'll get the number exactly
Yeah.
from Tony in a minute, but you're saying that it's less than 100,000 of these drugs have been sold.
Yeah, and it's horrifying. I mean, these are, these are people that just
How expensive is it, Lou?
the actual drug cost is about $27,000 a year. The
Mhm.
infusion cost of going to the centers brings the total up to around 100, just over $100,000 per patient per year.
So, okay, whose fault is it? I know you looked at the ecosystem a couple of minutes ago, but let's break it down. Let's get
Yeah.
direct here. Whose fault is it, Lou?
Okay, so it's actually a dance between the pharma companies, the pharmacy benefit managers, and the insurance companies. And that dance is whose fault it is. And it's really that straightforward, right? Now, how they do it in each lever, again, we could talk for 4 hours and go through the way that they manifest it, which sounds impossible, but that's how complicated they make that actual transaction. But when you boil it down, it's the pharmacy benefit managers, the insurance companies, and pharma working together to get the pricing as high as possible.
Okay, so your strategy of going directly to the United States government, this America First policy, sounds interesting and important as it relates to saving lives. I understand this is a great example with regards to Alzheimer's. Have you approached the new administration yet? Have you been discussing this concept with anyone in the government?
I've been doing my best to educate the key members of the government that we can that are actually the pertinent figures here, and I believe that only in an administration like this would I even be trying to do this, right? Like I said, this is not about changing the tire on a bicycle. This is building a whole new machine and doing it by just putting an engine on that bicycle instead, right? It's a whole different thing. And like I said, if you said, "How's the system broken?" It's broken in all these ways. If you don't do something that's fundamentally disruptive and that actually allows for the flow of innovation and capital to the areas that we want, and we make the
Yeah.
right things easy, no one's gonna do it. And what I saw, you know, and I saw this over and over, right? I was disappointed almost my entire life with the direction of actually like the pro corporate morass that became the Democratic Party. And when I saw that, it wasn't my party anymore, right? Like, it was like this major moment where it became clear that think about it. How many elections have we heard the exact same things? We wanna help all these people. We wanna do all these great things, and, like, nobody did them. All the big stuff never happened. It was like this slow motion morass, and I think that, I do think, I think direct social media, I think podcasts, I think direct information from people as opposed to having it all be filtered all the time. And you actually got to hear from the people that that were being, misrepresented or being, or not really. You got to see where the news wasn't lining up and where it was. And you also got to see where policy was lining up and where it wasn't. And so there's never been an opportunity, Mark, in our lifetimes where you could actually change the system fundamentally, and go after the biggest things and help as many people as possible by actually changing the structure. And so what I'm excited about is that again, like, I would have never done this with another administration because I never believed there was a real opportunity to change systems for the better of the American people.
So philosophically, the individuals in this administration that you've sat down with and explained how this disruptive business model would work, are they aligned with you? Do they see this as a positive opportunity and something actually that's feasible to execute? Because Lou, the issue with government is that well, there are multiple issues, but over and over again, I'm sure you would agree, private sector typically executes at a much higher, better level than government. Do you think the government in this instance is really qualified to execute with this vision, and are they willing to?
Absolutely. I absolutely 100% actually. I've never felt more confident in any thing this complicated and big in my lifetime, right? So I sincerely believe that everybody is trying to do the right thing. The reception has been like people understand where the system is broken and that this is possible. And the best part is that this can be done without like changing laws and doing all these different things. This is meant to be an elegant and real and immediate solution.
So what happens fast forward now? Let's say you execute on this America First pharma concept and it disrupts, especially with major drugs, for example, with Alzheimer's. What happens to Big Pharma at that point and their business model, their profit centers? They have this fiduciary duty to provide value to their shareholders. Are they going to be forced to go to the government and cut side deals with the government as well?
When I saw the president's historic executive order on most favored nations status with drugs, which basically means that you can't sell drugs anywhere else for less money than you sell them in the US, which is a brilliant step. And like I said, it's historic. It's a massive thing.
I agree.
Now what's interesting though is that it's the reason that Big Pharma's prices didn't crater in the stock market is because the implementation of it is hard, right? It goes after and it's hard because it's gonna happen. I believe it will happen. But it's there's a lot of rules and things like you alluded to. Government is hard, right? It's slow in some ways. There's a lot of pieces. It's like, so how you navigate all of that is tricky. What I think is amazing is giving at the same time, giving a sword to innovation on the largest areas, because if you do that, what you're gonna be doing is uh, you're gonna be driving that innovation, and big pharma will respond, right? They're going to have to. And maybe that means that in the future they'll be more amenable to the most favored nations pricing. Maybe it means that it'll drive innovative drugs to be directly negotiated. It could be any of these super positive outcomes, but ultimately it's going to change the system because the immediate sense will be it'll be a highly credible threat to an existing system. That will be the
Sure.
immediate reaction.
Well, Lou, let me ask a question. Will the patient, the Alzheimer's patient, still have to go to their local drugstore to purchase the medication?
So the current Alzheimer's system, they have to go to either a hospital or an infusion center and
Okay,
sit for 3 hours and get an IV infusion with a
I
nurse,
understand.
and the nurse has to be certified as a phlebotomist and all these other things, and I think those centers have to be monitored by, overarching medical license as well. So there's a lot of infrastructure to that.
Thank you for
For
clarifying.
what we're talking about, with prescription, you could do this at your pharmacy, right? These are simple intramuscular injections. So the nature of the administration is also much more accessible. And for this platform, which we call the Active Immunotherapy Medicines Platform, AIM, for that entire platform, the next generation of drugs that we're already working on would be actually potentially mailed to the house and could be applied as like transdermal stickers, which would
Oh,
be,
wow.
yeah. So we've been testing a lot of that, which is super
Huge
fun. But that,
advances with regards to delivery system. That's amazing, Lou.
Yeah,
But
it's a good
I
one.
guess I was going to ask you, like, as it relates to disrupting, why don't I guess whether it relates to this Alzheimer's treatment or any other drug, why don't companies similar to yours approach the retail pharmacies, from Walgreens to CVS to Duane Reade and beyond, and set up like these direct to retail deals where perhaps it's a good way for a brand like Walgreens to get exclusivity and attract market share from its competitor if they have some of the most critical types of drugs, treatments available at the launch of a new drug cycle or something. Like, have you considered going down that route where it's a private partnership, but a different type of distribution model?
So yes, on the final distribution, I think that that's all absolutely possible, right? In terms of how you get it to the consumer, totally possible. I believe that one of the things that'll happen, um, uh, the the primary provider of Alzheimer's care is still gonna be the government to some degree. And, because of the Medicare and Medicaid system, right? And so that's a fundamental outcome. I mean, if you look at the combined expenditures for Medicare and Medicaid on Alzheimer's, I think it was $353 billion last year. So indirect expenditure. And so they're still going to be one of the largest customers because they serve the most patients, right? I mean, just based on the way the system is. Um, and I don't think that's fundamentally bad. I think that what we would do with a direct to consumer approach is, my goal would be to be transparent and actually kind of share, um, the patient experience, and I think that you could do that in the interim through the partnerships with pharmacies for distribution. I think that the direct to patient mailing of the patches would be like the next step in terms of access and convenience. And I was talking about that almost 10 years ago, and everybody would make fun of me, and then the FDA allows me at-home prescription drug shipping, and then these drones are now allowed to do some of these deliveries. So the accessibility component and the cost structure drops even further, as those things happen.
Yeah, I like the I guess you're calling it DTP, right? Direct to patient delivery. But what the reason that I'm suggesting the pharmacy is because they have deep pockets for the most part, and perhaps it's a way of the private sector working directly with the drug manufacturer, right? Retail and the drug manufacturer, private partnership that could help mitigate some of the risk that you're talking about with this new disruptive approach, and maybe even get some financing and cut down the cost. Is that approach feasible?
You'd hope so. The reality, though, is that CVS is one of the largest, like, PBM conglomerate things,
Ah,
right? So
so
it directly it challenges their model for the current distribution. And the reality is that the reason we're spending more is because we structure it this way. When the government actually handles the distribution and is on top of the distribution to a larger degree, the costs are lower because there's less people in the middle, right? So there's just less hands in it.
sure.
Um, and the original goal of PBMs and insurance negotiation as a middleman wasn't bad, right? The original goal was to keep the government and pharma with a buffer, and so that things would be negotiated in a cleaner, better way for the American public. But 7 or 8 years less life and at least 2.3 times more per patient per year, we're probably not succeeding, right? Like the math is overwhelming that it's not working. And all of those changes, so we were the healthiest and one of the longest living countries in the world. And that a lot of this legislation around PBMs and insurance middlemen kind of started the slow decline to getting a lower return and worse life expectancy. So there is, you know, a correlation there. You can't really prove direct causation, but it seems that, you know, it seems that
Capitalism is killing humanity.
yeah, it seems that there are,
That's
yeah,
kind of what you're saying, right? I
I'm
mean, in
kind
a
of
way,
saying
as it
that,
relates
yeah.
to this specifically. So there are a couple of other issues, though, that I want to raise with you. Like, first, for example, you mentioned the president's executive order and referenced his most favored nations with regards to existing um, drugs and treatments. But my question is, as it relates to what you're talking about, why can you legally take this concept through the executive branch? Wouldn't legislation have to be enacted to allocate American funds to pay for this sort of a thing?
If you think about it like Operation Warp Speed, there was no legislation necessary to start that. So there are, very direct ways that this can be done, and where a pilot program could be started. And it would involve, cooperation from HHS, and it would involve cooperation from DARPA, most likely, and that combination would allow for something like this to happen. So the structure and the path, and there's a number of other ones that are all, again, non-legislative. Like, I'm not trying to pass, significant uphill legislature right now. I believe that health is a bipartisan issue. I think it's a unifying issue.
Completely agree.
I think saving, you know, American lives and saving, the taxpayers billions and billions of dollars a year are good values.
Couldn't agree
Um,
with you more. There really
so
should be no place for politics in saving lives. It's ridiculous.
yeah, I just I don't see it that way. You know, like, I just think this is such a unifying thing, um, and the truth is, you know, if we can, if we can do it, it starts immediately, right? Like, it's not something that this isn't like a delayed fuse. It's like the minute that we had this agreement, we would be making history with Alzheimer's and preventing Alzheimer's right away, right?
But Lou, there's a difference. Like when you talk about Operation Warp Speed, at that point in time, everyone in the country required that, or we were told that everybody in the country required that medical treatment, right? But in this case, notwithstanding the fact that you're saying 7 million Americans suffer from Alzheimer's, everyone doesn't need it, right? Everybody who's suffering needs it. And what will happen to small town USA, blue collar worker who's not making a ton of money and is like, why is my tax dollar going to that treatment now? I have my family is spending a lot of money over here with all these different health issues, these different ailments. We're spending a lot of money on drugs, and I'm putting my tax dollars towards Alzheimer's, but yet no one in my family is suffering from it.
I mean, if you think about it like this, you know, the annual savings in terms of dollars for Alzheimer's that are available are over $500 billion a year, every year. The patient suffering, that's what we're spending now, right? The patient suffering is obviously the personal part that's on top of that, and the family
Yeah.
suffering of the caregivers and all of those other things. The the idea is that the best investments that have ever been made by the US government are investments in innovation and investments in things that ultimately become tech. And my definition of tech are things that become democratized and demonetized, become accessible for everyone, that benefit everyone in the country. And this is an example where, by creating this path and by creating this momentum and by tackling these diseases, the return on investment should be unimaginable, right? It should be, and it's direct. And no matter what happens, this pathway, this system for innovation is going to benefit you, and it's going to benefit every American taxpayer, and it's going to benefit our families, and it's going to benefit our kids and our parents and our grandkids. So no matter what, creating that pathway is a victory. No matter what, creating a way around the people that are stealing 70 cents on every dollar from the middle is a good thing to do.
I completely agree with that point. But here's my question. When we bring politics back into this formula, which politicians do you expect will push back on this?
You know, the only politicians that would push back on this are people that are in the pocket of Big Pharma, right? And the reality is Big Pharma is one of the most powerful and one of the most broad lobbyists in the country. So these are known things. This isn't Lou saying this. This is, this just what it is. And
Sure.
I'm not saying that that's good or bad or left or right. I'm saying that that's the reality. And so it's going to be hard, with some of those folks because they're literally in the pockets of big pharma and have been for decades in some instances, right? So so that's a challenge, right? I mean, you heard people arguing for including soda on the SNAP programs. You heard people saying that by taking pure sugar junk, corn syrup, like horrible things, and said, you're going to starve our children in this country, which is just a lie. Right? So people that are being lobbied heavily by either the food industry or by pharma will say things that are that irrational, right? I mean, there were some people that didn't celebrate the idea of taking petroleum based, so the same thing that you run your car on, petroleum based food dyes out of our foods. And we're the only civilized country in the world that allows them in our foods up until now. And people were protesting that. People were upset about that. Right. So these are things that to me are so black and white and obvious and clear. And if you talk to, kids or mothers and you say, would you like, a little bit of diesel fuel in your Cheerios? They say no, right? So it's one of those things where, those interests are strong enough that they make really smart grown-up people make arguments like that.
Do you think that we are in the mindset yet as an American community where we can just be common sense based in the way that you're describing? Or do you think that it's just, we're not there yet? We're
I'm
still over on the dark side.
Okay, so I actually am super optimistic. I believe that this is a unifying moment. I believe that the way that we're gonna do it is through, I think medicine is a unifying theme. I think health is a unifying theme. I think
I agree.
reducing waste is a unifying theme, and I think that creating paths of innovation where we unlock really the American spirit of innovation and solving huge problems is a moment that we're in right now. And so I'm excited and I think it'll be a big shift. And I think that I think to a thing I tell my kids, if you want to move an oil tanker 90 degrees, you're screwed. It's going to be really hard. They don't do that. But if you put your shoulder into it and you really push it and you change it 1 degree and you look back 500 miles later, you're in a whole different place. And this is that the America First Pharma model and axiom for Alzheimer's as a pilot is that shoulder trying to move it 1 degree. And when we look back, it's going to be in an entirely different place. And it's a weird thing because like we can't do it all by ourselves, right? We have the product, the innovation. We're willing to give up the upfronts. We're willing to put it all on the table and like make it happen. We're willing to make it as low as like the lowest price possible for the American people. We're willing to give transparency for all of that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it takes visionary and historic leadership to do it. And like I said, I'm optimistic. I think it's gonna be we're gonna look back and be in a whole new place.
Lou, when are we going to see this whole disruptive business model kick in? If you could predict when it's going to happen, when will it start? Will it start by the end of this calendar year?
Oh my gosh. I mean, if everything I mean, this is something, like I said, that literally all it takes is somebody picking up the baton and doing it now, right? Like there's a
Right.
path, we've designed it, we've figured it out, we've got the team for it, we're ready to do it. All it takes is somebody picking up the baton and championing it.
Is that person RFK?
It could be, is the answer. I think that it's a combination of, um under ideal circumstances, it's a combination of, um, the White House and HHS. And the reason it's a combination is that this should be a unifying reality. This should be something that everybody, is happy about because it's fundamentally providing, like, it's providing the sword that you need against Big Pharma to fight for innovation, right, and to fight for the patients. It's providing that tool that can happen now that is a direct threat that will get their attention, right?
I hope you do it, Lou. I really do. So, Lou, I appreciate all the time you have provided today, but I really appreciate your insight and your mind, as you know.
Thanks.
Everyone ends the show with me in the same way. Essentially, what I do is I incorporate the name of the show, as you know, Some Future Day, into a leading question. Maybe that's my legal background, but are you ready?
Sure.
All right. So, in some future day, Alzheimer's will be eradicated when?
When we prevent it from starting in the first place.
Lou Reese, thank you so much for joining me on this awesome episode of Some Future Day.
Mark, thank you so much for having me on some future day, and I'm hoping that that future day is soon. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Some Future Day. I know your time is super valuable, so I hope you learned how you can leverage emerging technology to improve your life. And exciting news, my new book, Some Future Day, How AI is Going to Change Everything, is now available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, and other major booksellers across the globe. I'm so proud to share that because of your support, the book topped the charts. It became #1 bestseller in cryptocurrency, #1 bestseller in artificial intelligence, and #1 bestseller in robotics. So, if you're curious and ready to learn how AI can enhance your career, your community, and your family, get yourself a copy today.